wife and I both grew up in southern Arkansas. She spent some time in Texas as well. Her dad was a football coach. One of his more notable students that he coached, student athletes, was Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
Sonia's dad had him when he was in high school, and he was even then, moving toward making money. He was just a real aggressive entrepreneurial type fellow. We met at the altar in a little Baptist church in Camden, Arkansas. It was the Sunday that I walked down the aisle of our church to surrender my life to Christian ministry. That same Sunday, her family walked down the other aisle. They had just moved to town. He was the new coach in town, and she and I met at the altar. And 6 years later, we walked down a different aisle and commenced at a different altar to begin a life together as a husband and wife. So, we go way back. We were, high school sweethearts. I always had a hunger to know what God was doing in the world. Ever since I gave my life to him, he kind of opened the world up to me. So as a sophomore in college, I was at a little Baptist university in Arkansas called Ouachita Baptist University. And I jumped into their exchange program to go to Japan, lived in Japan for a year, studied Japanese, and really saw a perspective on the world that I had never seen before. And I felt strangely at home there. I wanted to be a part of what God was doing to expand his kingdom around the world. I wasn't called into missions per se at the time, but I had a great love for missions. I had a missionary kid was my pastor growing up, the person who baptized me. And so I grew up hearing stories of missions. And so when I got to Japan, where they had less than 1% Christian, I realized that back home in Arkansas, I could stand in line to wait to fill a pulpit to preach somewhere or to take a church staff position. There were lots of people there. In Japan, almost anywhere I went, I was probably the only Christian they had ever met. And so I decided to go back for a couple of years. We had a program called the Journeyman Program where you could go for 2 years, kind of modeled after the Peace Corps. By then, I married my high school sweetheart, Sonia, and I had gone to Golden Gate Seminary in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a great multi-ethnic melting pot. Our church had 6 different language congregations worshiping there in San Francisco. And after finishing there, we went to Hong Kong, and I taught at Baptist College for a couple of years. And I think if you'd asked me about 3 months into it, what I thought about it, I would say, shoot me now. I'm going crazy. I don't like this. I was in deep culture shock. I was stressed out, and we were both ready to go home. But that's the kind of part of the process of adjusting cross-culturally. And 6 months in, we fell in love with it, and we're there for the next year and a half. After that, we asked God if he would allow us to be missionaries the rest of our lives. And he graciously agreed. And so we finished up there. I went back to get a terminal degree at the University of Chicago. And it was while I was there that I met this guy named Dr. David Barrett, who was an Anglican Church Missionary Society missionary who'd served in Africa, but was more noted as the editor of the World Christian Encyclopedia. He'd spent 14 years getting a handle on the whole state of the world in terms of evangelization, in terms of scripture and Christian ministry and presence and so forth. He was actually tracking over 14,000 people groups from every nation on earth. And I met him at this conference when I was in Chicago, and he invited me to come and be his associate. So I ended up joining him. At the time, he was working out of the International Mission Board. It was called the Foreign Mission Board then, of the Southern Baptist Convention in Richmond, Virginia. And I went and joined him, finished up my dissertation there. Martin Marty at the University of Chicago was my internal advisor, and David Barrett was my external advisor. And while there, Barrett introduced me to what's been called the 1040 window. He called it World A. It was that part of the world that is not only non-Christian, it's unevangelized. It has no prayer or access to the gospel. And he said, this is the unfinished task of the Great Commission. And I became captivated with that. I searched the scriptures as any good Baptist would do to see, is this biblical? And I saw, Jesus first identified it. He called it the ends of the earth. And the ends of the earth became my my lodestone. It just drew me. And from that point forward, we were committed in that direction. I've given the last 40 years almost of my life to that passion and focus. And it's taken us all over the world, from our home office in Richmond, Virginia, with the International Mission Board, to assignments in Egypt and Tunisia and India and Thailand and all over South Asia and Central Asia.